have been brought to anchor in a new district full of agricultural and commercial possibilities. One that is destined to become one of the most flourishing sections of the Dominion, and to which I can safely and conscientiously advise all who wish to emigrate to go. I mean the district of Temiskaming. C.C. Farr, 1894.
But when Charles Cobalt Farr arrived in Canada in 1871, few people had even seen Lake Temiskaming. The retreating ice age had left a wilderness of lakes and rocks. Occasionally, a fur trader or coureur de bois from Montreal would pass. But the wilderness remained until 1821, when Fort Temiskaming was established by the Hudson's Bay Company on the Quebec side of the lake. Then came the timber barons of the Ottawa Valley, and for the next 50 years, the sound of the axe predominated along the shores of Lake Temiskaming. Charles Cobalt Farr, born in Suffolk, England, and educated at Haileybury College. In 1874, he arrived on the northwestern shore of Lake Temiskaming.
If I ever get an opportunity of making a stake in my life, it will be here.
During the next 15 years, Farr purchased over 1,200 acres, and in 1889, founded a settlement.
And I called the town of the future Haileybury, after my old school.
He was an Englishman, and a nice old fella, I think.
He figured the Canadians were colonials. You know, in other words, what the hell, they can carry water and they can hew wood and he can make a profit. My opinion was that he wasn't here for the betterment of Northern Ontario. He wanted to be a land baron.
Within 5 years, 45 families had settled in Haileybury. C.C. Farr's dream was coming true. In 1893, John Armstrong, then the Crown land agent for the district of Temiskaming, established a rival settlement 5 miles north of Haileybury and named it New Liskeard. New Liskeard, contrary to all geological expectations, had an agricultural potential. C.C. Farr had miscalculated. Haileybury was on the southern boundary of the clay belt without water access into the interior. The best farmland was to the north. He watched the farmers pass by Haileybury on the way to New Liskeard, where John Armstrong was selling land at 50 cents an acre. A rivalry started between the towns. Armstrong tried to buy Farr out. Farr refused. He traveled to England instead to distribute pamphlets urging people to come to Haileybury.
Temiskaming, civilized, is a condition of the future. It is essentially a new country. Were it otherwise, this pamphlet would not now be sent abroad to proclaim the fact of its existence. The question of most interest to men is whether the land will support them and their families.
My dad came here as a pioneer in 1896 and settled up on the White River. He went right into the bush and cut out a farm right out of solid bush.
Both Farr and Armstrong believed that access to the railway outlet at North Bay was vital to the growth of their communities. By August 1903, the Temiskaming and Northern Ontario Railway was pushing its way north, skirting lakes, spanning rivers, and blasting through solid bedrock, slowly inching toward Haileybury and New Liskeard. A few miles ahead, 2 lumber contractors, J.H. McKinley and Ernest Dara, were searching for suitable timber for use as railway ties. On the 7th of August, 1903, on the shores of Long Lake, 5.5 miles south of Haileybury, Dara noticed the strange color of the ground near the beach.
We immediately got down to business, picking up loose pieces of rock. They were unusually heavy. In washing away some of the gravel, we found flakes or leaves of metal. We could bend it.
McKinley and Dara sent a number of rock samples to Montreal for assay. The answer? Native silver, assaying 4,000 ounces to the ton. Ontario's first provincial geologist, Dr. Willett Green Miller, was sent to make a survey of the area. In his report, he speaks of pieces of native silver as big as stove lids or cannonballs lying on the ground. The excitement his report created was a major contribution to the infant mining camp. And before he left, he added another. On the shore of Long Lake, he set up a crudely lettered board. Thus giving the town a name.
For we sing a little song of Cobalt. If you don't live there, it's your fault. Oh, you Cobalt, where the big gin rickeys flow, where all the silver comes from, and you live a life and then some. Oh, you Cobalt, you're the best old town I know. You can talk about your cities and all the towns you know, with trolley cars and pavements hard and theaters where you go. You can have your little auto and carriages so fine, but it's hobnail boots and a flannel shirt in Cobalt town of mine.
The rush started. Cobalt sprang into existence. Miners and prospectors built their homes on the bare rocks surrounding the mining camp.
It was terrific. It was like the Klondike or any of those other great rushes. It's tremendous.
October 1903, Tom Hebert stakes the property which became the Nipissing Silver Mine. Soon, more than $500,000 worth of silver would be mined from a single vein.
The town just erupted, and they're talking about population explosions. Christ, we had one here long before they thought about it in China or Japan. They just moved in and went crazy.
You must remember, there were no roads here. There were no cars originally. All the ore was hauled by horses, and it's heavy. This thing just didn't happen overnight. It happened by sweat and blood and, honest to God, hard work, 12 hours a day.
They just thought it was never going to end.
1905, 16 operating mines produced $1,400,000 worth of silver at a market price of 60 cents an ounce.
We've got the only Lang Street. There's blind pigs everywhere. Old Cobalt Lake's a dirty place. There's mud all over the square. We've got the darndest railroad, and it never runs on time. But it's hobnail boots and a flannel shirt in Cobalt town of mine.
Oh, when I come to Cobalt first, no, there was no girls. There was about 3,000 men here working at that time, maybe more. No women at all. The two first women that come into Cobalt was Flossie Legree and my sister. It was the two first women coming to Cobalt. And boy, wasn't the men ever glad to see a skirt.
The first two women that came to Cobalt got off the train down here, and they built a stage for them to come out on, and they were guarded because there were so many men, and they were the only two women. And the men threw $5 and $10 and $20 bills up into the stage to them.
Our husbands was working here, and they built a shack for them, good one. And they had to keep the windows shut after the sun was down. It locked, darn well locked, too. You bet. That's just how rough it was then.
The provincial law stated that no liquor could be sold within 5 miles of a mining camp.
In the early days of mining in Cobalt, you had to bootleg. You couldn't buy liquor in Cobalt, but you could go to Haileybury and you could buy it at the hotels up in Haileybury.
Haileybury was 5.5 miles away. As the businessmen moved in, Haileybury prospered.
Now, Haileybury was developed more or less as a residential town for Cobalt. Now, a lot of those nice houses you see up there were built with money that came out of this town. But, you know, you got a lot of the upper crust, I guess you'd call it, lived up there.
In any town, there are some people that you associate with, some that you don't.
In the eyes of the New Liskeard people, Haileybury was a butterfly town. It was more cosmopolitan because people who had been attracted here with the big money as American interests and so on set up shop, built their homes in Haileybury.
The rivalry continued unabated. The businessmen of New Liskeard, jealous of Haileybury's natural advantage of beauty and proximity, found other methods to share in the wealth of Cobalt. The businessmen farmers of New Liskeard formed the first mining company in northern Ontario, called the Temiskaming and Hudson's Bay Mining Company. Cost of the original shares, $1, payable in 4 yearly installments of 25 cents each. The silver boom continued. 1906, $3 million. 1907, $6 million. 1908, $9 million at a market price of 67 cents an ounce.
There's a floating population in Cobalt at one time of 25,000 people.
They would pass the railway station down here where silver bullion was piled up like cordwood. But nobody stole it. That stuff would stay there for 2 or 3 days, maybe a week before they'd load it on the freight and take it out of here. There was 4 or 5 theaters. One in particular, they would bring acts in from as far away as New York, Broadway. But they'd bring the whole act up here for the benefit of a chosen few.
Just they'd lift the curtain and maybe 15 or 20 girls would be there dancing and singing and all that stuff. Some of them wouldn't be hard to make a date with them either. Boy. Some of the nicer looking girls you ever looked at, too. Yeah.
And like every other mining camp, Cobalt had its fires and its accidents and its tragedies. In 1907, the overcrowded living conditions allowed Cobalt to fall easy prey to a smallpox epidemic. In 1909, $12 million worth of silver was shipped. Mines were operating 100 feet below the streets of the town.
At one time when the mill was going, they were taking 100 bricks of silver a month out of there. All pure silver bricks.
This is the signal bell that is used for raising the miners up and down from underground. This is the largest drill core that was drilled in 1952 by Diamond Drill. That's the core barrel. That's what called the miners to their dinner. This steel here, 16 feet long, there are only 2 pieces left that I know of, probably in Canada. And they were used in the early days by the steam drills. This here is the bulldozer that was used from North Bay to Cochrane on the Temiskaming and Northern Ontario Railway. And there's hundreds of horses lost their lives, and they were buried along the railroad as they came north. But that was the original bulldozer in the North Country. Over here we have a dynamite thawer that was used by the prospector in the early days. They had no chemicals in the powder then to keep the powder from freezing. Once it froze, it wouldn't explode. So they put the powder in these holes here and put the hot water in here, just like a car ad, and that would keep the powder from freezing. It's just a lot of junk. It doesn't, it's history. That's the importance of it all. But as far as the value is concerned, it's not too great. But it is great in history. I don't know anywhere where you would find this type of thing now, because we're just grabbing the last crumbs. We're working in the 11th hour. When it's gone forever.
With a market value of only 70 cents an ounce, Cobalt produced a staggering $15 million worth of silver in 1910 from 41 mines, 1/10 of the world's production. Cobalt stood supreme among the developing towns in the north. The world's richest silver camp had gained its place in history.
Old Porcupine is a muskeg, Elk Lake's a fire trap. New Liskeard's just a country town, and Haileybury's just come back. You can buy the whole of Latchford for a nickel or a dime, but it's hobnail boots and a flannel shirt in Cobalt town of mine.
The silver sidewalk was a surface vein. This was about 4 miles out of Cobalt. I don't think there ever was a richer vein of silver discovered in this camp. They say it was around 20,000 ounces to the ton. But it was right up on the surface, just lying there like a big sidewalk.
But I remember bicycling out there and stopping to look at it. It crossed the road diagonally, and you could take a pocket knife or anything and scrape the silver right off it. It was that pure. I've walked on the silver sidewalk.
The mining town, the farmer's town, and the county town. Rooted in rivalry, yet interdependent, they became known simply as the Tri-Towns. C.C. Farr had watched prosperity exceed far beyond his earlier predictions And before he died in 1914, his beloved Haileybury had become judicial seat of the district of Temiskaming. October 4th, 1922. Officially, the forest fire season was over. Farmers had permission to burn the roots and stumps from the land they were clearing. Hundreds of small fires blazed all over the north.
As we were coming up the highway, we could see a building here catch on fire, and then another building in the area catch on fire. It just seemed to be so hot and so dry that just a spark needed to drop, and then it would be gone in a blaze. And my dad and I went back to the house and the barn and the stacks of grain and hay that we had, and a cloud of flame started towards us, and my dad said, "Pat, let's get out of here." Everything west of the track in New Liskeard was burnt, but the wind blew south and got the upper part of Haileybury and cleaned it right out. There wasn't a hope. If they could have had 100 fire departments, they wouldn't have did it.
October 5th, 1922. 11 people lose their lives in Haileybury. 6 of them trapped in the disintegrating cathedral. 9/10 of Haileybury is destroyed. 700 buildings wiped out. 3,500 people homeless. A few hours after the fire burnt itself out, it started to snow. The victims were honored. The survivors were aided. Haileybury struggled back to life. Food and clothing were rushed from the surrounding towns. Government and Red Cross relief workers donated money and energy. A gift of 50 old streetcars from the city of Toronto provided temporary living accommodation for the homeless. 70 buildings were left standing, including the wealthy homes on Lakeshore Drive. The people gradually rebuilt the town, but Haileybury never again enjoyed the prosperity and population of its pre-fire days. Haileybury's affluence had always been dependent on Cobalt's success. And in Cobalt, the boom was ending. By the mid-20s, Cobalt was entering its 3rd decade of silver production. It had become the grand old lady among mining camps, proud of its record of over $200 million worth of silver shipments.
For we'll sing a little song of Cobalt. If you don't live there, it's your fault.
The boom was over. The silver was gone. The depression started early and lasted longer.
People start to starve, fight and everything else. They had to get something to eat and they couldn't. So, boy, it got so tough the people start dying. I know 3 died right in Cobalt from starvation.
You know, they left no secondary industry to continue after the mines were gone. They just took what was beneficial to them. Exploitation, this is what the only word for it. They exploited the area and they went on. They buggered off.
Well, you could tell they were practically starving. I mean, they'd sit down and gulp a bowl of soup. You know, you could tell the way they tore into it that they were absolutely hungry.
The biggest thing that I remember in Depression times was that there was nothing to do.
Certainly we're bitter. But this has been the story of the North. We've been ripped off. They talk about rip-off. That's not a new word. We've been ripped off and raped around here for years. Where's our timber gone? Where did all this 262 million, where did it go?
So it became what I always called a living ghost town practically overnight, 3 or 4 years.
They watched the outflow of wealth to the United States, the outflow of people to other communities, with simply a statement, well, all right, let it go. We created this thing, we'll stick with it.
Where all the silver comes from, and you live a life and then some. Oh, you Cobalt, you're the best old town I know.
Another $60 million worth of silver was to come from the cobalt mines, but each little boom ended, and the town struggled on until the next boom, which would also end. Today, with a population just over 2,000, Cobalt has only 3 mining companies in operation.
Don't ask that foolish question, how much silver left? Because there's nobody can tell you that. Your leading geologist won't even do that.
The surface has been gone over quite thoroughly, and pretty near all the deposits that are shallow have been found.
Lots of muck this afternoon on the level. Both levels will be full of them.
There are areas where we could have silver deposits in the order of the original cobalt camp, but the chances are they would be quite deep, in the order of maybe several thousand feet.
Now, if they can go down that deep for gold, why, there's no reason why they can't go down 2,000 or 3,000 feet for silver.
The silver mine is not finished and they'll never finish.
Oh, Cobalt is an excellent place to live, just the finest in the world, sure.
When I hear of Cobalt when I'm on trips or something, and they say, oh, I know that place, I've heard of it before. I mean, it makes me feel proud.
You can go into any place in Toronto and you will find someone either from or has worked in Cobalt. Oh, I was there in 1912. You'll never hear anybody say, well, I was from Liskeard in 1912.
Well, I'd say the future of Cobalt right now is as good as any place else. We're short of good homes.
I'm living in Cobalt because I like Cobalt. If I made $1 million, I'd still live in Cobalt. And I wonder sometimes why these people left Cobalt.
With financial backing from the Ontario government, the Cobalt Restoration Committee is developing the town as a tourist attraction.
This building you're in right now, there's the mine shaft. As little as 3 months ago, they were working in that shaft. It was used as a working mine shaft in the early days.
It'll be a proper place for tourists to come and see living history. And I dare say now that our mining museum is probably one of the best museums on the continent.
After all, we have a lot to give, even Haileybury or New Liskeard and Cobalt especially. I think it's a well-known fact that probably in a few years' time we won't have room to walk on the streets with the tourists.
They're either going to make a town of it, or they're doing just to spend the government's money, one or the other.
Yeah, I think the government should pay more attention to the ore possibilities in the cobalt camp than they're doing.
Oh, I prospect a little, not much. My legs wouldn't let me.
I figure that there could be more in the ground than was taken out.
How long is the camp going to last? Don't ask that one either. It's straight economics. If silver was $1 an ounce, there wouldn't be a mine working. If it's $10 an ounce, you might have 20 more mines working.
It is the hope of many prospectors that the big find will come within their lives. It's like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It is still possible, yes.
But it's in Haileybury that the School of Mines trains the young men who will develop those pots of gold. Haileybury is still a residential town and district seat. It proudly boasts of being the most beautiful town in the north. The fire is now only a memory, and the rivalry still continues with New Liskeard.
Liskeard, more or less, I would say, progressed as it was originally planned. but the only place that did.
We have one of the finest farming sections in Canada, in the New Liskeard area. Tremendous. We have a lot to be thankful for.
If you're looking for security, I guess Liskeard has a great deal to offer.
I like the people here. We have wonderful people here.
We should be united instead of quarreling. We could go a long ways if we're united. Otherwise, we're not going to go anyplace.
I think without our basic resource industries going top speed, we can't look for much more than mere survival.
The people in Cobalt never say quit. As you can see, we're still here, alive and well. We've got nothing to prove for it.
Besides, there is still the people that believe that cobalt has, the mother lode as we call it, has not been found. There are still prospectors who are looking for it. And they believe that one of these days they're going to come across it and cobalt will just be cobalt all over again from the early 1900s.
Where all the silver comes from, and you live a life and then some. Oh, you cobalt, you're the best old time.